Capitalism. Capitalism, also called free market economy or free enterprise economy. This economic system is dominant in the Western world since the breakup of feudalism, in which most means of production are privately owned. In this politico-economic system, production is guided and income distributed largely through the operation of markets. Although the continuous development of capitalism as a system started only from 16th century, the precursors of capitalist institutions existed in the ancient world. The flourishing pockets of capitalism were present during the later European Middle Ages. The development of capitalism was led by the growth of English cloth industry during the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. The feature of this development that distinguished capitalism from previous systems was the use of accumulated capital to enlarge productive capacity rather than to invest in the economically unproductive enterprises, such as pyramids and cathedrals. This characteristic was encouraged by several historical events. Where did capitalism come from? The origins of capitalism are complicated and stretch back to the 16th century, when the British systems of power largely collapsed after the Black Death. In case you don't know about it, Black Death was a deadly plague in the mid-14th century that killed off up to 60% of Europeans' entire population. As a result, a newly formed class of merchants began to trade with foreign countries, and this newfound demand for exports hurt local economies and began to dictate overall production and pricing of goods. It also led to the spread of colonialism. The death of feudalism, a hierarchical system often seen as oppressive that kept poor people bonded to their master's land, which they farmed in exchange for a place to live and military protection, also left rural British peasants with no homes and no work, which eventually funneled them away from the countryside and into urban centers. These former farm workers then had to sell their labor in a newly competitive work environment in order to survive. While the state worked in concert with the new capitalists to establish a maximum wage and clamp down on beggars. What does it mean to be a capitalist? Individual capitalists are typically wealthy people who have a large amount of capital, money or other financial assets invested in business, and who benefit from the system of capitalism by making increased profits and thereby adding to their wealth. A capitalist nation is dominated by the free market, which is an economic system in which both prices and production are dictated by corporations and private companies in competition with one another, and places a heavy focus on private property, economic growth, freedom of choice, and limited government intervention. Generally, those to the right of the political spectrum tend to be pro-capitalist. Those on the left change their inclination towards anti-capitalism. Next point is, how does capitalism impact people? The kind of impact that capitalism has on your life depends on whether you are a worker or a boss. For someone who owns a company and employs other workers, capitalism may make sense. That is, the more profits your company brings in, the more resources you have to share with your workers. This outcome theoretically improves everyone's standard of living. It's all based on the principle of supply and demand. And in capitalism, consumption is king. The problem is that many capitalist bosses aren't great at sharing the wealth, which is why one of the major critics of capitalism is that it is a huge driver of inequality, both social and economic. Why do people support capitalism? Capitalism supporters believe in several key points. Economic freedom leads to political freedom, and having a state-owned means of production can lead to federal control and authoritarianism. They view it as only sensible way to organize a society, insisting that alternatives like socialism, communism, or anarchism are doomed to fail. As former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, whose pro-capitalism stance is said to have devastated by the British working class, once described capitalism like this: "There is no alternative." In response to capitalism's negative impact on the environment and our shrinking natural resources, many say that those resources will only become more valuable and able to generate more capital as they continue to decline. They also believe that the competition between companies benefits consumers by making products more affordable, and that capitalism encourages people to work harder to achieve their dreams. They are likely to dismiss anti-capitalists' concerns about inequality and oppression by saying that rich people are rich because they are more productive and hardworking than poor people. Placing central importance on the individual rather than the collective is a classic hallmark of capitalism. Why do people oppose capitalism? Anti-capitalists view capitalism as an inhuman, anti-democratic, unsustainable, deeply exploitative system that must be dismantled. They see it as a counter to democracy because of how capitalist bosses hold power over workers in the workplace, and the fact that the more capital one collects, the more power they have. This power is against the rules and ideologies of democracy, the decentralization of power. Karl Marx was perhaps the most famous opponent of capitalism in history. He was a German communist, philosopher, and economist who ironically helped enough to popularize the term. He wrote in his book Capital, Volume 1, a critical analysis of capitalist production, quoted, "Just as man is governed in religion by the products of his own brain, so in capitalist production he is governed by the products of his own hand." So, if you understand the ideology and concept of capitalism, don't forget to like and share. Subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon for more. Thanks for watching.